This area here was annexed by the city of Pittsburgh in 1868 and increased the land area of the city about 20 times by doing that, at the whole east end and so on. And so the issue of developing this land was a very big issue in the 1870s, and the 1880s, 1890s. There was a lot of controversy over legislation, but there are a lot of large estates here, as you know, at one time. Larimer, of course, Mellon, and so on along the line. And a lot of those people wanted to subdivide the land and make a lot of money from real estate speculation. And Ed Bigelow, who was, you probably know as the father of Pittsburgh Parks, that big statue in Kennedy Park, was very critical in developing this area and the infrastructure here, laying out streets and starting the drive to put sewers in and to culvert the streams too. One question that came up, John Stevens and I talked about this, is well, the chief reason I think why they culverted the stream was because of the desire to avoid flooding. There was very serious flooding, and particularly the flooding that went down to Washington Boulevard. And I found a statement from a city government report in the early 1920s that talked specifically about that point. What a difference it made now that you didn't have to worry about floods in Washington Boulevard and how Highland takes place in that period of time. The culverting of a lot of streams took place in that period of time, like 9 Mile Run, of course, also 4 Mile Run, and those other runs that are culverted. And if you want, I can send you a map that was devised by my dear former colleague Tim Collins of all the streams that existed in Pittsburgh in 1800. Shows them all marked out, and you'd be amazed at really how many there were. And then you look at a map from 1993, and you find they're almost all gone, except for 9 Mile Run and a little bit of a couple of others.
I asked Mr. Germany, who's a member of the Larimer Consensus Group and the Green Team, to provide some background about
one of the founders of this was Miss Orlean Carroll. She started over 40-some years ago with this vision plan, her and the architect, Dr. Steve Hawkins. In 2002, Senator Furlow, at the time with Representative Preston, got together and said that we needed to organize and come and put we put 5 action teams together. That was our biggest project that got us off the ground was the Village Green. We'll probably go through it today. We're in the process for next year to how to get more volunteers and how to get sustainable funds to keep the project going, because over the last 5 years all the young volunteers, and they came out and helped us, they moved on to college and out of state and stuff like that, and 80% of this neighborhood is seniors.
A few words about this spot before we get started. But in addition to Bob, and also Ian Lipsky is a member of our the professional team on the steering committee for Living Waters. Christine Mondor, who's a architect with Evolve PA, and
the stream used to come more or less right over here, the other side of this building, and cross the railroad. We're not sure exactly where. The old maps are not very clear, but probably that was the first point at which the stream was culverted and channeled below ground. Many things have been done to the stream. The pathway that's shown on your map isn't really the natural original path of the stream, which, by the way, always change in any case. At one point, the stream all along this whole area sort of disappeared. That was sometime toward the end of the 19th century. We're not sure exactly when, but the sewers that are there that carry all the combined sewage lead eventually along that pathway down into Washington.
Does Elvis No, they're separate.
Yeah, what about it?
This is all built up. The stream came through here, just at the bottom of that little ledge there. Came through here and then down and followed East Liberty Boulevard. The really old maps showing the original pathways aren't really very accurate.
That's what literally three parallel pipes running that way, right there underneath that blue van.
Not leaking?
How many feet is that?
What are the pipes
for us equal?
What are the pipes made of? Let's see.
Like they're pipes, they're not conduits, direct conduits.
They don't have the material in the database.
Clay.
It might be brick being that side. They're probably in really good shape. Like the ones in the 50s and the 60s are falling apart, but the ones made 100 years ago are in great shape.
So these young people are all volunteering for Open Hand Ministries, which is a housing ministry that puts low-income residents into home ownership in East Liberty and Garfield. We've done 11 houses over the past 6 years. So East Liberty Development is paying Open Hand Ministries to clean this out.
The man.
By those buildings, and everything flows this way. So there's a minor high point that targets the water. I don't know here, but there's no pipes here. Over there, they were very deep. Very probably.
My understanding, though, is that this piece of park property right here is eventually slated to be converted into housing, and then this lot across the street that was formerly private property is slated to become parks. And then, the park is going to move. You see, so the stream could have ran over that way. We're going to walk and get right back into the channel again. So this is an exciting natural corridor that's going to happen.
38 feet underneath the parking lot where we were standing. The pipes are down about that far. So
38 feet down.
Yeah, 90-inch pipe.
All right, John, go ahead.
It's actually going to start being torn down in the next few months. I think the contract is in the bid process right now. This is part of the Liberty Larimer Phase 1. McCormick Barron Salazar is the lead developer on this section. They're also, a part of it is going to be across the street, across East Liberty Boulevard as well. So we've been working with them to think a little bit about how to work with the rainwater off of that development and integrate it into opportunities that expand around this development. So there's a lot of different public agencies that are involved in this project, but through the Choice Neighborhood process, they're all coming together.
A network of green spaces with stormwater infrastructure has been envisioned, kind of framing Larimer, and part of that is this property over here, which is actually in East Liberty, but it's on the border and really is going to be serving both communities. The city has agreed in principle to exchange the ball field that we walked through, which has been closed for some time, for this new land. So that's a process that we'll have to go, the city and URA will have to go through, but the city will take over maintenance responsibilities for this new piece of parkland. We are coming under contract with URA to work with Keel to develop the park plan for this, and we're really excited because it occupies such an important place in the Negley Run watershed. There's no design for this yet. I think there's going to be a lot of community process. Hopefully we'll be collaborating with artists and stormwater management people, with Living Waters and everyone else who's interested to develop this plan.
This area that we are, this valley, which would have been the valley for the stream, it would have come down here and turned, will go under its original, on its original route as we go under. But this part in Larimer was subdivided a lot earlier than the Highland Park side. And so this part right here, which we see as kind of parkland, had a lot of little tiny open frame houses we can see from the maps. And but just on the other side of the valley in Highland Park, there were still a couple old estates and then some big houses, and it kind of changed into the dense fabric that it is at a couple decades later. But the other thing that you'll see on some of these old maps is you'll see big parcels being held by Dollar Savings Bank, by other things. And if you read some of the history of these things, there was a lot of land speculation, a lot of folks who invested and went bust very quickly, and so land turned over what we would consider to be a pretty rapid rate. You might think that these old estates and these properties were held and were permanent and had a sense of like longevity, but this area was really rapidly developing. So in 1882, developed, relatively undeveloped and still farmed. It just, the decade past 1910, just 3 decades later, both of these places are pretty well urbanized like we can imagine today. So.
We're going to continue down. Just to warn you, this next stretch is fine. But we're going to reach a point where the going gets difficult. We're going to scamper up the hill, back over to the northern edge of our lighting doesn't really describe what would be possible here. The stream that's under us isn't accessible. We don't really want it. It contains sanitary combined and flow. It's dirty. We don't want to daylight that stream. Okay? What we're talking about is the process of diverting as much as we can of upstream runoff into a series of channels, bioswales, terraced wetlands that would treat the water as it's coming down through this valley, turn itself back into a stream system with some periodic check dams in the valley below, and you'll see how it'll be incredibly obvious why we're suggesting what we're suggesting as we move further down. We could detain, we believe at this point in our early investigations, a significant portion of the runoff that could come through this entire area and then release it slowly into a channel further down and maintain a series of swales, wetland ponds, and a larger ecosystem that could possibly tie in with the Allegheny River once again. And it's reassuring to me to see Susan Rodemaker nodding her head with this idea, because there are a lot of ducks to line up for this. This is not something that just gets decided because it looks like the right thing to do. There are 8 or 10 different important city, county agencies who regulate the use of this land and have their stakeholders. This isn't going to happen just because it's a good idea.
The intersection of Negley and Washington going on right now. David Heinz from the Penn State Center laid out a, what would you call that? A rain bioswale?
Bioretention garden.
Bioretention garden. Well, there's going to be on the north side of Negley next spring a swale or low flow area put in there.
So we'll be able to walk down. This pathway was built probably in the 50s as part of the regrading and rethinking of this entire Negley Run section, the construction of Negley Run Boulevard in late 50s. And so a lot of what Matt was just describing is already here for us. And let's enjoy it. Right.
Right.
Reinforced concrete bridges in the country, in the world really. It was a very new technology at the time, built almost at the same time as the Larimer Avenue Bridge, which crosses Washington Boulevard. That Larimer Avenue Bridge, also crossing Negley Run, was at the time the largest or longest or highest span of any reinforced concrete bridge in the world. Obviously, you can see it's still in pretty good shape. In the 50s, there were 2 streets that came down here. One of them called Butler Street, sometimes called River Street. The other one called Chianti or Chianti Street. And it's called Chianti because because Pittsburgh and the Italians that populated the valley here, there were homes down here on the valley floor and along the sides of the hills. People cleared off the hillsides and grew grapevines down here. My understanding of talking to some of the old-time people who lived in the area is that this was sort of seen as a party town, a little neighborhood where people stayed out late. There were some bars down here. This was on weekends. You'd come down here with your friends. These city stairs were the access to the area down below. Just burying the pipes or the stream that was flowing above the surface completely changed the topography of this valley floor and built Negley Run Boulevard. This is an important new transit connection between Aspinwall, Fox Chapel, and the suburbs to that part of the city that bring them into East Liberty, the important business district, and further on into Oakland and downtown road. Lots of potential. David, why don't you tell us some about...
Sure. So right now we're doing the construction of the bioretention garden, which is kind of a nod to start the impetus. And next spring we're going to be constructing a bioswale along the north side of the street. And the far side.
Opposite side.
We're on the south side.
We're on the south side.
So if you look at the street itself, the curb's really deteriorated. So we're proposing to actually chisel down and recap the curb at a flush grade with the road. So all the water flows evenly into this bioswale down along the road into the bioretention area. And we can accommodate something like 750,000 gallons. And there's actually a lot of water coming out of these hillsides through ground seeps. So we're looking at it being a multi-million gallon system by next year. And in the future, we see that we have all the development happening up here, Living Waters of Larimer, and these great organizations that can begin to start channelizing that water down into the system. You know, this is a park, and this doesn't really feel like a park. There's not really amenity. So we kind of envision that the north lane itself could become the stormwater management pedestrian thoroughfare, whereas the south lane can be repurposed to be two-way traffic, so that all the cars and people become separated from each other just by a little bit of...
When when Chianti was here, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with understanding the form of cities and what makes them happen the way they happen. And when you had, imagine when you had the hillsides with little houses that somebody might have built themselves, or, you know, it wasn't really planned development, it just kind of happened. It's somebody with a lot who subdivides it and says, I can make more money selling small units or selling small lots, and then somebody builds on it, right? It's a very kind of haphazard way of form making. But Pittsburgh was churning. We needed people, we needed density, and up here in the Larimer Plateau, there were at its peak 13,300 people. There are less than 1,300 people today. So this development and the way this was back in the day was a product of an economic need, right? Then in the time period that Ian's talking about, when this was cleared out and you know, reconsidered, that's whenever we were losing population and people are thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to compete, connect to, or relate to the suburbs? Because that's where 11,000 people wanted to be, right? So this begins to look more like the infrastructure and the planning and kind of clearing out some of that incidental stuff. And that's what we're left with today. Now the third stage, and some in the kind of planning profession talk about, is a stage of integrated, it's called landscape urbanism, or it's a sense of bringing landscape back into city planning and natural systems back into city planning. And so that's what all of these different projects are a part of. And that's frankly what our planning system is catching up with. Our planning system, our zoning codes are really based on a 1950s understanding of how we put buildings in a neighborhood and how we zone things. So this is really a part of a much larger conversation that's going on. And Mr. Germany told me a great story. I don't know if he shared it with you, that this used to be a drag racing thing. No. Yeah, because you know the car can only sit on either end, so they would challenge each other and just blow down and slow down by the time they got to the end where the cops were, and the same thing back uphill.
Christine, where do you do all your research?
Just all it is. You don't even have to go down
but not yet. I'd like to. I'm going to go this way.
You're taking the long way. Oh. Yeah. Do you want this? Yeah, we can go this way. Or they have that rope there. Do you want any more of this? No.
Good enough. Well, I'm going with you.
You don't follow the rope.
I'm going to go upstairs. I'm
Follow
going to
the
take
rope?
the rope. Yeah, I'm taking
Look at it right there.
I don't trust
it's like
old
all
concrete.
there.
Yeah.
And you know what I found out? She parked her car in the middle of the concrete.
But anybody can be in the garden for $10 a season. And with the new little houses, the season is extended, so we'll see how it works.
The community has said we want this as our village green, we want this to remain a village green, and is currently in the process of figuring out how to secure a kind of permanent status here. So UDream, which is a program through CMU that brings in minority architects into the city, and they do a little classwork at CMU, and then they work here in the city. And where's Ashley? Ashley is a UDreamer, and she's staying in the city, yay. And so a group of UDream interns secured shipping containers and did some design. Community now is developing, we're working with them to develop how these things can be standalone classrooms, collect water, come off the grid, get their own power. But it's really fantastic to see the Green Team and the Consensus Group and all of these other groups have these ideas, and it just takes time. It takes time to get them to fruition.
K development, there's 37 units, and they're going to spend, I think, somewhere around 15 to 16 connections to what we're going to be the combined sewer, if we can get it approved by the county. They're going to adjust that so later on, if possible, like a PWSA or somebody can insert a pipe that intercepts that water and stops it from going in and puts it down into Little Negley Run. In addition to that, you wouldn't know it by looking at it, but that intersection right there, in that corner, gets 1 million gallons a year runoff into an inlet. And so there could be a nice demonstration project right up on this side of the street that could capture probably 85% of that, and then stick it into that pipe system that will be right over there and take it down to Little Negley Run so it doesn't get polluted.